Yeah, so whenever you have got, some technical difficulties, you can use the chat box to communicate your difficulties so that, somebody from CDT can solve the problem. And you are also highly recommended, advised to introduce yourself using the chat box. If you have got, technical questions regarding the presentations, you are kindly requested to post them in the question and answer box. And due to the number of participants, your camera and microphone are disabled. But if you have got some burning issues to share with us or ask questions verbally, then raise your hand using the raise hand button, and then we'll enable your microphone. Yeah, so going to just to give you, some high-level introduction about data management. So as you might be aware, clinical data management is a process of collecting, cleaning, and managing data. And this has to be in compliance with regulatory standards, and we have got several regulatory standards. And the overall objective of clinical data management is to provide high-quality data, which is ready for statistical analysis with minimal misses and with acceptable level of variations and so on. So basically, when you combine all the good practices together, they are meant for ensuring safety of participants in clinical trial and credible data. And you can imagine that, without data management, you will not be able to get credible data. And even for safety, to get, safety signals and to get meaningful result out of the collected safety data, again, data management is going to be important. So the importance of data management will not be overemphasized, and it's very crucial to pay attention to data management in clinical trials. So this is just my personal reflection. Of course, we're going to listen to the experts in detail later on, but my feeling of common scenarios of data management in LMICs, Sub-Saharan Africa included, is that usually adequate resources are not allocated at the beginning of clinical trials, and usually we're going to encounter problems when it comes to audits or inspections, and then we start thinking seriously about data management. But by then, things are going to be very late. Usually there is a tendency to use softwares which doesn't fulfill the minimum requirements, including user names and passwords, and also time and date stamps and audit trail, which are the minimum requirement actually, and there are lots additional requirements. So softwares including Microsoft Access and Excel sometimes could be used for data management, especially for research other than clinical trials. And there is inadequate validation of the clinical data management systems or the database in general. And this is a very common problem in our setup. And the other problem is not implementing adequate procedures around data management. SOPs may not exist, or if they exist, usually don't comply to them. Data management plan is there only for the sake of existence. Data cleaning plan usually is not implemented, and database closures are not usually optimal. And usually there is a prolonged interval between that subject last visit and database closure. And this is a metric that sponsors and CRO will be looking at, to come and work with your sites. And different initiatives, they have got also some timelines for sharing, disclosure of the clinical trial result. And starting from last subject, last visit, so minimum within 12 months, the data has to be shared. When it comes to pharmaceutical sponsors in CROs, the requirement is even more stringent. So as I said, this is my personal reflection. We are going to look here a lot about this from the experts, the panelists in this webinar. We have got 5 panelists in this webinar, very much experienced in data management. So I will introduce the panelists. So the first panelist is Lalita. Venkata Subramanian. She is an associate director, she's an associate director at data management in FHI 360 Biostatistics and Data Science Division. She had over 21 years of data management experience an accomplished technology leader with significant experience managing a full range of data management activities, including technology development, implementation, and integration for both clinical and behavioral studies. She has led and supported data management activities for more than 25 clinical studies in various therapeutic areas, ranging from phase 1 up to 4, including investigational new drug or IND studies, WHO pre-qualification study, and epidemiological research studies. Ms. Venkat has supported regional data management activities for multi-country and multi- and single-site clinical studies at clinic sites in many countries throughout Africa, Asia, Central, South, and North America. She has a Bachelor of Science degree in mathematical statistics. So Lalita will discuss with us today on data management SOPs and data management plan. The second panelist is March Ms. She is the Manager of Business Analysis and Validation at FHI Clinical. She has been with FHI Clinical since November of 2020. March has over 12 years of experience in the CRO industry, performing various functions in both clinical affairs department as a clinical research associate and in the IT department as a software validation tester, business analyst, manager, and project manager. Marge has an undergraduate mathematics degree from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and a Doctor of Physical Therapy degree from Wingate University. Marge's clinical and IT experience in the CRO industry and hands-on patient experience offers a unique perspective and contribution to FHI Clinical and the information technology team. So today, Marge will discuss about computer systems validation and data security. The third panelist is Michael Otiono, who joined FIND in June 2022 as Clinical Data Manager based in Nairobi, Kenya. He has over 12 years field experience working as that data manager for various drug studies in resource-constrained settings. Before joining FIND, Michael worked as data operations manager at the NDI and previously worked at the KEMRI Wellcome Trust Research Program in Kilifi, Kenya as systems and data manager. He is also a WHO TDR fellow and has worked with the Infectious Disease Data Observatory to set up a data sharing platform for visceral leishmaniasis. Michael holds a BSc in computer technology from Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology and is currently finishing an MSc Information Technology at Strathmore University in Nairobi, Kenya. So Michael will briefly take us through edit checks and query management. And the fourth panelist is Michelle Fanton, is currently a senior data project manager with FHI 360 Biostatistics and Data Science Division. With more than 20 years experience in data management, she's an accomplished professional with a passion and focus on electronic data collection, sponsor support, high quality documentation, and cross-functional collaboration. Major therapeutic areas of work include COVID-19, ophthalmology, neurology, arthritis, vaccines, infectious diseases, rare diseases, and diabetes with well-rounded experience in all phases of clinical trials. She has designed, maintained, and logged over 40 clinical databases ranging in size and complexity and has data perspectives from CROs, pharmaceutical companies, central laboratories, and investigative sites. Ms. Fanton has a Bachelor of Science in Health and Wellness and has acted as subject matter expert and author of 2 chapters of the Society of Clinical Data Management, Good Clinical Data Management Practices, which is basically a very useful resources for data managers throughout the world. So Michelle will talk about quality aspects in data management. Last but not least, we have Ismaila Abubakar, who is currently a data scientist with Institute of Cancer Research UK. Previously had worked with Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine UK as information system developer for close to 4 years. and before that with MRC Gambia as a senior data manager for 17 years. And again, before that, he worked for Noguchi Memorial Institute in Ghana for medical, as a senior programming assistant for 5 years. Myla has based in computer science and MS in IT professionals, specifically on databases. So today, Myla will be talking about source documentation, transcription, and long-term archival. So with this introduction, I will leave the floor open to Lalita to share her slides and talk about data management SOPs and data management plan.
Thank you, Dr. David. Let me share my screen. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
All right. Hello all, welcome. I'm covering 2 topics in this presentation, SOPs and data management plan. Let's look at the first one. Standard operating procedure is a set of instructions on how to achieve uniformity in performing a specific function or task. They promote consistency and efficiency of processes, accountability for performing tasks, meet regulatory guidance requirements, and provide opportunity to examine and improve processes. SOPs should be task-oriented. They should provide detailed overview of the task, specify roles for each task, and reference other SOPs and work instructions. Now, how do we manage these SOPs? By identifying a team to review and approve these SOPs, by reviewing them regularly, and by instituting document control with approval dates, applicability dates, and versioning. And that was on SOPs. The next topic is data management plan. So we all know that data is central to a trial, and it serves as the basis for data analysis, submission, and approval. For the achievement of high quality data, proper planning of this of management of study data is essential. It helps find gaps in the process, develop QC checks in the process, and standardize the process. DMP is developed at the beginning of a study. It's a living document that is reviewed and updated as needed periodically throughout the study. So let's look at the target audience of a data management plan. DMP is developed, it's developed at the beginning of the study, and it's usually done by the lead data manager of the study. Everyone involved in the study, everyone else, the sponsor team, the PM, the site staff, the monitors, and DM and biostats teams, all of them should be trained on the DMP. What goes into a data management plan? You can see there are several aspects of the data management process, and all of these should be included in the data management plan. Wherever applicable, SOPs should be developed and support each of these aspects. Now, in the interest of time, I'm only going to touch on a few of these. One of them would be database design and validation. Evaluate the system to be used and describe the system, database design, edit check programming, and validation testing of the database. This section should also address questions like, how will post-production changes to the database be implemented? Will metadata changes be documented in the system in the audit trail? And these are some of the questions that should be addressed in this section. More details on this will be presented by Marge and Michael on system validation and database validation. The next aspect would be data validation and cleaning. As you all know, this is the most important aspect of data management process. And DMP should have an overview of the cleaning process, whether it will be focused data cleaning, or will there be any manual data review outside of the EDC system, etc. As per the study needs, develop a data quality plan or a data cleaning plan as well to describe the cleaning process in detail. This plan should address some of the questions on what data to clean, how and when cleaning should be done. Will data updates be documented in the system? We talked about this a bit earlier. Audit trail, any quality assessments and targeted study endpoint checks planned for the study. All of this should go into the data cleaning plan. Michelle will talk more on the quality aspects of data. The next aspect I would like to touch on is the central lab data transfer. So again, external data, especially lab data, adds another layer to data cleaning. So briefly describe this process in the DMP and develop a data transfer plan as needed. And the last one would be protocol deviations. Questions to address in this section would be, do the edit checks look for possible protocol deviations in data? Will the protocol deviations be captured in the database as CRF data? If not, how and when will they be transmitted to data management to generate data set for analysis? So having a section on protocol deviations is very important. And so those are some of the aspects of this, but all these key elements of the data management process should be covered in the data management plan. Next, we'll see when the data management plan will be updated and the versioning will change. So as we said earlier, this is a living document. Possible time points when data management plan may get updated are when protocol amendments happen, addition or removal of a site requiring a specific process change, a new CRF is added, which again could bring any process change, and a data handling process changes completely during the course of the study, and yearly review. These are when the data management plan can be updated and versioned up. So we saw that having a data management plan with a process defined and documenting procedures will be very helpful. Having a standard operating procedures and work instructions to support this DMP will again help the study. Having a complete vision of how the data management will be done during the study, and communicating and training the study team on DMP is again a very important thing to do. And that was my presentation on SOPs and data management plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lalita, for the brief introduction on SOPs and data management plan. Then we move to March for presentation on computer system validation and data security. So to you, March.
Sure. I'm going to share my screen.
Yes, please.
Okay. Can you see and hear me? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm also going to present on two topics here today. I'm going to present on computer systems validation. This is at a system level. And then I'm also going to talk about data security briefly. I'm not an expert in that area, but I did want to touch on that as it relates to clinical trials. So first, let's talk about computer system validation and what that means. So by definition, it is a process used to ensure accuracy, reliability, consistent intended performance, and the ability to discern invalid or altered records. So that comes straight from 21 CFR Part 11, which is, of course, one of the regulations that we are bound by with electronic systems. So outside of the regulations, why is computer systems validation important? Well, you want to make sure that the system is doing what it's intended to do. We want to make sure that if we say this system is going to do X, Y, and Z, that it actually is doing X, Y, and Z. More importantly, we want to make sure that we're not compromising patient safety or data integrity. So we want to make sure that we're validating to assess for those aspects. So generally, just an overview, this is the software that typically would require validation. Most of us, this is going to fall under the last item, the software that's used to create, modify, maintain, archive, retrieve, or transmit FDA required records. As Aletha pointed out, SOPs are vitally important to making sure that you have a consistent process for your activities. So same thing goes for computer system validation. So before you really get to that point though, if you are using a third-party software, you do want to make sure that you are adequately assessing the supplier or the vendor of that software. You're looking to make sure that they are compliant with their regulations, and you want to make sure that they are actually have a good SDLC, software development lifecycle, in place, and they are performing unit testing, code reviews, and so forth, that they are managing their software appropriately. And then, of course, your CSV SOPs, you want to make sure that you are documenting how you process computer system validation. What roles are you using? What's the life cycle look like? What are the different phases? How are you assessing risk? Change control. How are you handling change control if an update comes out with that particular software? What regulations are you bound to? I also wanted to point out that in your SOPs, we don't want to have frequent SOP deviations to document, right? So you do want to allow for some flexibility and refer to your system validation plans where applicable. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but you do want to make sure you identify the different validation roles for a project. So for a system that you're implementing, you want to make sure you have people, the expertise where needed to make sure that you process that, that project accordingly. So this is the slide I want to spend the most time on. This is going to be a high-level overview of the validation process. Now, everyone's SOP is going to look a little bit different, right? So, but these are just the basic phases. So you've got your planning phase. This is where you're identifying, really starting to think through that intended use, which is so important. If a piece of software offers, for example, 100 different requirements, but you're only intending to use 45 of them, well, that's how you're intending to use the software. You're not ready to expand your scope yet on that piece of software. Software categories. So this is maybe you're using just the default configuration straight off the shelf of a third-party system, or maybe you're doing some extra configuration for a piece of purchased software, or maybe you're developing your software in-house. All that's going to need to come up front and think through that as you start this validation process. This is where you're doing that vendor assessment if you are purchasing software or using third-party software. And then also, this is where you want to think about how does this system impact that data integrity or patient safety. So you want to do a risk assessment. In your specifications phase, this is where you're going to identify those functional requirements, which requirements are applicable to your intended use. And you're going to prioritize them. Maybe these are nice to have requirements, but these are must-have requirements. Those are important in feeding into your validation plan. You definitely want to highlight those regulatory requirements that are applicable. So for example, if it's an electronic, if it uses electronic signatures, that's going to be 21 CFR Part 11. You want to make sure you highlight those things. And then on a requirement risk level, this also is going to help identify your testing approach. So for your requirements that maybe don't have at high risk, you may want to do very little to no testing on that particular requirement. Your validation plan is very important, where you identify those roles and responsibilities. You're talking about the scope and approach to your validation. And again, all of these things that are happening before you get to the validation plan are going to feed into your scope and approach. And then, of course, you're going to identify what has to happen for us to push this system into the production or live environment. And then finally, you get into that testing phase, which is probably the most fun phase of all, if you're like me. So this is where you're writing those test scripts. It may be an ad hoc test script, depending on the risk of the requirement or the system. All that feeds in, like I said, to the validation and testing approach. Your user acceptance testing is going to happen here. So this is where your expert to the system are going to go through and perform the user acceptance testing. And you'll identify any deviations, if there are any, and work with the vendor or the software supplier to correct those if needed. Traceability, that's just tracing your test scripts back to their requirements. So it shows that you are testing actual requirements that you defined earlier in the cycle. Finally, you're going to wrap it up with a validation approval report. This is where you're going to summarize all the deliverables that you produced. How did the testing go? Were there any deviations? And this is the point where you're going to say, yes, we're ready to push this system into production. It's ready for live use. And then finally, as I said before, you really need to make sure you identify how you're going to manage change with that system. What happens if there's an upgrade? Is it a major upgrade? Does the upgrade have anything to do with your business processes? If not, maybe you just want to document that there was a version change, but you didn't need to do any validation. Those are the types of things you need to think about once the system moves into that maintenance or operational phase. Other considerations, I touched on this already. So these things are going to feed into your validation scope, as I said. So if it's a default configuration software, you may just want to leverage what the vendor provides in their documentation. You may not decide that based on the risk, you may not decide that you need to do any validation at all. Configured software versus custom developed software, you're going to have a bit more validation involved in these areas. I understand that some software may be installed directly on site machines or servers. If that's the case, you definitely want to make sure that you document an installation qualification. And this just ensures that the software is installed according to factory specifications. It's just something you have to produce, a deliverable, a document that shows, yes, we installed it according to specifications. And then you want to make sure the software is indeed functioning as expected. So as I said before, I'm speaking on the system validation level. So maybe you use a system and you're going to use it for 7 different studies. This is a great idea to document on a system level. It's not study specific. You know that you're going to use this system the same way for all your trials. This can be shared with prospective clients, sponsors, regulatory auditors, and so forth. On a study level, which is, of course, protocol specific. So your protocol essentially is more of your requirements. So any edit checks or validation rules you're generating on the study level is going to be on this covered on the right side. So you're doing user acceptance on that study level. And again, this is shared with that study sponsor. So that covers it for validation. I did want to touch on data security. Again, processes and SOPs are so very important to make sure you document so you're consistent in how you do this. But you do want to make sure that you are installing antivirus software, that you're keeping any of your devices, any devices that your clients or you are using to access study data. You want to make sure that it has the most up-to-date software and security installed. Regarding user accounts, you want to make sure that your users are provided the least privilege approach. So what that means is every user shouldn't have access to every site. They only have access to the sites they're meant to be touching data for. Every user doesn't need administrator or project manager role. Maybe it's just a data entry role. That's the role they need to be assigned, is least privilege. You want to perform user account reviews periodically to make sure that the users that have access continue to need access. Of course, password expiration and security, that's so very important to make sure that we keep our data safe. Auto log out, generally here in the States, we're in the 15 to 30 minute is pretty standard for a system to auto log you out. However, if that's not possible, we definitely want to make sure we train our users to manually lock their computers when they leave their workstation. And then software backup and disaster recovery. So if you are working with third-party software, this is something you'll generally collect during that, that quality, the vendor assessment at the beginning of your project. That's something you want to get updated every so often. If you are installing the software on your machines, this is something you want to take into consideration and make sure you have a documented process for this, because you want to make sure if there's a fire in your facility, how are you keeping that data safe? How are you recovering and backing up that data? And that's all I have to speak about today. Thank you.
Thank you, Marge, for the nice summary on computer system validation and data security, which is actually very critical in African setups. As I mentioned at the beginning, data validation is an area where we need huge improvement on. So thank you for the summary. We are expecting lots of questions here, so we'll see. The next presenter is going to be Michael. He will be talking about edit checks and query management. So the floor is open for you, Michael.
Okay, thank you so much, David. I will talk about edit checks and query management. Ideally, I will just provide an overview because there's a lot to discuss, but we have limited time. But before that, I just wanted to mention that I am from FIND Diagnostics, the Global Alliance for Diagnostics. And FIND was established in 2003 as a product development and delivery partnership. And also is the WHO Collaborating Center for Laboratory Strengthening and Diagnostic Technology Evaluations. The more information you can find from the FIND website. At data management at FIND is part of the data science unit, and we have a number of data managers, biostatisticians, and data scientists involved in clinical data management for all the studies at FIND. And for example, in 2021 alone, we had quite a number of studies. We managed over 30 studies, enrolling over 15,000 participants. So, as I mentioned today, I'll talk about edit checks. Studies suggest that there are a lot of errors in data entry, and this ranges from 2.3% to 26.9% across different studies that we undertake from day to day. And in most cases, data entry mistakes contribute to these errors. And again, we have misinterpretation of source data information. We all know that anything that can go wrong will always go wrong. So what are we supposed to do to ensure that we can be able to conduct that clinical trial data management in a way that we can be able to achieve high data quality at the end of the data management? So we have edit checks, and this is the best approach that we can actually make use of to identify discrepancies in clinical data management and eventually to be able to provide resolutions to issues that are found. When implementing edit checks in clinical data management processes, we normally take different approaches. So the first approach ideally is that you're using an EDC system that allows you to program all the edit checks within the system. But then if your EDC system does not allow you to program edit checks within the system, then you still have an alternative to program edit checks outside of the EDC system. Implementing edit checks within EDC systems or clinical data management systems probably is the best approach because it allows you to easily manage all the queries within a unique.
Apologies for the interruption, Michael. So can you come closer to your computer?
You can hear me?
Yeah, it's better now.
Okay, thanks so much. Yeah, so I was mentioning that when implementing EDC queries, it is the best approach because it allows you to manage all the checks within a single environment, and it has advantage that you can be able to easily and within a very short time implement the checks and assign queries and get your feedback from the sites. When you implement your edit checks outside of an EDC environment, in most cases we'll use data processing tools such as data or R, and this allows you to extract data first of all from your database and reshape it and process it and generate these queries. So it is a lengthy process, and when doing this, normally we have to ensure that we program even the simple checks, such as the missing data checks and data type constraints that allows you to be able to minimize the data collected based on a single data type. So this is a very important point in edit checks because first of all, it's important So when implementing the checks, the first and the most important thing is to come up with a data validation plan. The data validation plan again.
Sorry again for the interruption, Michael. So we are losing you again. Sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry for that, David. Let me see if I can change my settings. And let me know if it is better.
Yeah, probably that could help. Yeah.
Okay, I've done that. So during the implementation process, the edit checks, before you come up with the edit checks, first of all, you need to come up with a general data validation plan. And in the data validation plan, you will need to list all the data items that will be of concern that you will need to look at. And this includes manual checks, all the things that you can be able to automate, and all the listings that you'll be looking at in terms of data cleaning process. So once you develop your data validation plan, the next process will now be to program the edit checks. So programming the checks, in most cases, if you're using EDC, the tool that you're using will provide you with a particular way of doing the programs. It could be through direct programming within the system. It could be programming outside, maybe in Excel or XML files and uploading the systems. Or if you're using a separate tool such as Stata, you will just need to write Stata programs that will be able to process your data. After programming your checks, it is important that you test thoroughly and validate your checks. And during this particular process, at the end of the day, there is the only proof that we can have that you validated the tests is through the documentation that you will need to generate at the end of it all. So it's important to validate, but then as you validate based on the SOPs and the process outlined in the DMP, you will need to document the process, because this will be the proof that the database was actually, the checks were tested and validated. The last phase ideally is now to implement the checks that you have programmed in the production environment for use in generating queries. So as you do that, you will be able to realize a number of benefits if you are able to efficiently implement the edit checks within your database. First of all, it will help you to ensure that you have complete data. At the end of the day, you can be sure that your data will be of high quality if the checks were thoroughly implemented. And also in the DMP process, I think there was a section on the protocol deviations. So edit check is a very important tool that you'll be able to, that will help you check all the deviations that might occur based on the protocol that you're implementing. So if you look at the protocol itself, you can be able to look at issues that can be programmed as part of the edit checks. And then this will allow you to detect any protocol deviations during the study. At the end of the day, edit checks allows you to be able to lock your database much faster. There are cases where the last visit happens and then it takes ages and months before the database is locked. In most cases, this is because maybe the edit check was not properly agreed on before the study started. And you end up taking a lot of time doing data cleaning at the end of the study, which is not the best. The best approach is to make sure that you have thoroughly reviewed and tested edit checks together with the rest of the study team, including the biostatistician, and then it is implemented in the database. And when you collect your data, as soon as you start the data entry process in the clinical databases, you should be able to generate the queries and resolve them. So edit check is closely linked to query management in the sense that through edit checklists, we are able to implement checks that will generate queries in clinical databases. The query management process can be simple, but we know that this is an iterative process which begins when data entry is done by clinical data management team at the sites. And then depending on the data management tool that is used, if it is an online tool where they're able to enter data directly with edit checks program, the queries will be automatically generated and can be assigned by the data management team for the sites to resolve. This process happens from the beginning of the study until the end of the study, until all the queries that were generated are actually resolved. In cases where data management tool is not an online platform and paper-based data collection system is used, then a different approach normally is taken for query generation and resolutions. So we use the data clarification forms in this case, but still data will have to be entered in a given system, extracted, and then edit checks run, and a data clarification form generated, which is then sent back to the clinical teams, depending on the study setup for resolution. So it is a paper process, which, if you're not careful, might take quite a very long time to be resolved. And so attention should be, we should pay attention to query resolution turnaround time based on the system that we're using. At the end of the day, once all the queries are resolved, we need to have data clean data achieved. Basically, another joint effort between the data management team and the statistician before the database can be locked. In conclusion, even if you implement queries, still we should be able to implement additional tools like dashboards that can help us to have a very good overview of the queries that have been generated in the clinical trials database. And this will help us to identify need for database changes. In cases where the edit checks were not programmed correctly, we should be able to go back and re-implement them. And in cases where it is the site users who are not entering data correctly, probably site user training will need to be done to make sure that data collection should happen the right way. But above all, edit checklist and query management in general will be able to help us also to set priorities for data cleaning. So at the end of the study, we know that data has been properly cleaned, and we will be able to get the clean data that is meant for analysis. Up to that point, I think that will be the end of the discussion on edit checks and query management. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you very much, Michael, for this important topic. Again, edit checks and query management are one of the areas where we need optimal implementation. As you know, we are moving from paper-based CRF to electronic CRF because of the very reasons that we have edit checks and also simpler query management when we are implementing eCRF. So thank you very much, Michael, for the nice presentation. So the last presentation will be by Smaila. So Smaila will be talking about source documentation, CRF transcription, and long-term archival. Again, very important topic to be covered and for implementation on clinical trial sites. So Smaila, the floor is yours.
I think Michelle goes first. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, Michelle.
That's okay.
For some reason, yeah, sorry for that. So go ahead,
no
please.
problem. All right, let me share my screen. Okay, I'm going to build off of both Lilitha and Michael's presentations. Oops, this is not what I want. And talk a little bit about how once you have the data in the database, how to clean it and keep it high quality. So as Lilitha mentioned in hers, the data management plan outlines a lot of things in data management, but what you do want to focus on is creating sort of a plan to do a data quality review. So make the plan, document the plan, and execute the plan when it comes to quality. One of the first topics I want to talk about as far as data cleaning and quality data is data visualization. And this is sort of a newish way to look at data now that we have a lot of EDC data and we have a lot of electronic data sources. Data visualization provides a way to look at that data in a different way. So it's not just data, you can look at metrics through data visualization. So things like query rates, data entry rates, those kinds of things can be visualized as well as the data. On the left side of the screen in the blue circles, those are the advantages to using a data visualization. And I want to stress that this is not just the EDC data that comes into play. It could be all kinds of data from your vendors. It could be safety data, central lab data, even protocol deviations can be pulled in so that you can look at data in a really big, robust way. But this allows you to see the data very quickly. You can recognize patterns and errors in the data because you're looking at it in such a high level. And it allows a lot of users to look at this data that wouldn't normally be able to. So the data is very shareable and they can interact with the data. So for instance, if they see a site that has a high number of open queries, you can drill down and look at those queries this way very easily. The green bubbles sort of outline the disadvantages or things that you want to keep in mind when using data visualization. And sometimes this will require some interpretation or definitely an understanding of the protocol and all the sources of data that are getting pulled in to your data visualization. Because if you don't understand the protocol, you may misinterpret some data that you're looking at. Another important thing to keep in mind is that this data is living. So it is pulling in data usually in real time, and that data is changing. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And then if you find an error, it's just important to be realistic about what you're looking at. So it could just be an estimate based on what you're looking at. You need to drill down and investigate further. But in general, this allows just a very robust way of looking at large amounts of data in real time. Another important thing to think about when you're thinking about quality in data management is collecting data that's fit for purpose. So this is important not only when you're designing your database collection tools, so your CRFs, try not to collect data that's not useful, but it also comes into your cleaning aspects of data. So try to identify what data points are critical based on that protocol. So that would be endpoint data, safety data usually, and focus your cleaning efforts more on critical data and then less effort on the non-critical data. And this is hard for data management people to do. Anyone in data management knows that we are obsessed with having things perfect. But one of the biggest things you need to realize is that the data will never be 100% perfect. It'll never be error-free. So once you accept that, and then you can move on and focus your cleaning on things that make a difference. And one question I always like to ask myself when I'm cleaning data is, how is this data point going to impact the ultimate analysis? So in data management, your goal is to collect data for analysis. If this data error isn't going to impact analysis, then don't spend your time cleaning it. Focus your cleaning on other things. And then look at data holistically, which kind of ties into my previous slide about the data visualization, but you can also look at data in spreadsheets and filters and just look at data differently than you normally would, because you pull out errors that way. In addition to the edit checks that are programmed into the system that Michael talked about, there's just different ways to look at data to create quality data. I'm going to talk a little bit about database closure and then how you get quality aspects into your database closure. In my opinion, these are the three most important things when it comes to database closure: speed, communication, and documentation. And they're all interrelated, but speed is pretty obvious. Right now, the industry average for last patient to last visit to database lock is 36 days. And a lot of sponsors even want it faster than that. So that's that may seem unachievable, but I'm going to give you some ideas on how to make that happen. But communication is going to be a big part of that, and obviously documentation. So my next slide kind of go into how to do that. And similar to what one of the themes in Michael's presentation is that you try to get as much done up front as you can. And then when you have your edit checks programmed ahead of time and they're all working and been tested, this allows you to clean on a rolling basis. So what I mean by that is, as the subjects are exiting the study, you're cleaning their data in real time as they exit. So this means you don't have as many to clean at the end, which can shorten your database lock timeline. The other things that are going to help you are just communication, and I mean communication with everyone. So biostatistics, Very important to communicate with from the very beginning all the way through database lock. Ties back to my very important, how does this impact analysis question? At any point in the study, if you need to pull in biostatistics and actually ask them, what does this protocol amendment mean and how's this going to impact analysis? That you have to have that communication open with your biostatistics group in order to achieve a really fast database lock. Same thing with your vendors. If you haven't spoken to your central lab vendor through the entire study and at the very end, they're going to send you a data transfer and you have no idea what that data transfer is going to look like, that's going to slow you down. So establish communication up front with your vendors and then your sites and your CRAs. Those are the people that are giving you your data. And if you don't have good communication with them, that's going to slow you down. And then finally, realistic resourcing. Establish a timeline and figure out how many resources you need to get a database locked in 36 days, for example. And do that early and communicate. And then I guess lastly, my last slide is just my take-home message here. Keep calm and clean smart. So either clean smart makes you calm or keep calm and you can clean smart, whichever way you want to look at it. But that's my take-home message for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle, for this nice summary. So it was not my intention to leave you out, but it was my lead, doing some tricks. So important presentation again on data visualization, fit for purpose data and database closure. Michelle has also given us a very important tip how to be able to close a database within 36 days or less than that after the last visit. Very interesting presentation. So finally, we'll move on to Ismaila for his presentation on source documentation, data transcription, and also long-term archival. Ismaila.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, so I assure you, you will have the shortest slides for presentation ever. So basically, you all agree with me that in data management processes and in any trial or study, some or most of the key things are source documentations, adopting good practices, and using the best known method. Transcription, pay important attention to transcription, and then long-term archiving. You will all agree with me, these are all key to achieving a very successful study or a trial. So basically, before I actually mention the source documentation, I just want to reiterate how important source document it is for study. So you will see that actually source document is actually what is either transcribed into our paper CRF or onto our ECRF. And then sometimes we have the ECRF where we actually capture data directly. And in this case, we will be able to actually use it as our source document by capturing the PDF. And it is important to also actually have a source document agreement. One other thing we should also take note is a training on CRF completion guidelines. Actually, it is important to have a training on it, and a review of source document is really important. And of course, or having signature of PI and delegate on CRF is also a key thing. So basically, for good documentation, we need to adopt and actually follow these attributes. So the first one is attributability, like to be able to know who actually is doing it. Legible, I mean, it should be very legible for people to see. Contemporary, that's timeliness, should be original and accurate. So this has actually been forming through acronym, which is ALCOA. So basically, that is good documentation. And then before I move to the next one, which is the transcription, it is important to actually touch on the fact that CRF completion guideline is key. And this is actually what where we have the development, maintenance, and the instruction for completing of CRF. And some of the instruction you find in it is adopting standard formats, providing sufficient information in the header, limits the use of text, and then use version control. There are a lot of them, but just a few of them now. So I will now move to the main one, which is the transcription. So basically, this is the standard to actually adopt when you are doing transcription. One-to-one with the source document. Again, it should also be legible, should be accurate, and void of mistakes. So my last slide, which is on long-term archiving, is also, as I said, it's a very key thing in data management process and in every study or a trial. So basically, it is necessary to agree on how long our document, CRF, source document, will be archived at a very early stage of the study. So basically, it is important. Why? Because we need to meet regulatory requirements. It is important. And why? Again, somewhere down the line after the study, we may want to answer some question on study, or some people will want to adopt some something from our the CRF or document that we have captured before. I have had a situation where after 12 years, we were contacted to actually retrieve some information from what we have archived. So basically, and how long also depend on institution. This vary from institution to institution, but it is important to adopt long-term archiving process. So basically, this is my last slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stella, for the brief presentation. So you've touched upon very critical aspects of data management, which are actually partly done by the sites when it comes to source documentation and transcription of the data into the CRF, usually the task of the sites. But then again, this is a very critical aspect in data management. If you put in place a very high quality in terms of developing your source documentation templates and TRFs, and also doing the documentation of the source documents and also the TRF, then more or less one is guaranteed that we're going to end up with a very high quality of data. And the same holds true for long-term archival. This is an issue which is not given due attention in several sites in LMIC. So that completes the brief presentation from the panelists. As you have probably noticed, the presentations are very much brief. That was the intention to make it very much interactive. So we highly encourage you to put your questions. We know this presentation is a bit technical, but then again, any doubt that's created in your mind, you better clear them out by asking questions. So you type your questions in the Q&A box, and then the panelists will be responding to them. So what I will do in the meantime is that I have prepared some questions for the panelists to give their thoughts. So I will share a slide with some questions, then I will be asking the panelists to share their opinion on it. So the first question is, what are the usual challenges or common findings in African side, or for that matter, in LMIT side, with respect to the topic that you covered? So probably let's go with the same order as the presentation. So I give the opportunity to Lalita to respond to this first. Lalita?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rabbit. So what I think is, one of the challenges is fragmented data management process and lack of consistency. So it's a fragmented process. There's no concrete, complete plan due to not visualizing the overall data management process and planning for the execution of each activity. Not standardizing data management process across studies, not defining any procedures to govern the activities. And these are some of the challenges, not just in African sites, but everywhere. That's what we see. And these could be due to strapped resources, lack of availability of trained staff and equipment, workforce sustenance, lack of quality assurance, and lack of participant commitment. So, I think the idea should be to look at the big picture, plan for it, and so that all the aspects of data management process can be completed well.
Yeah, thank you, Lalita, for pointing out this important point. So the same question goes to March. So in terms of computer system validation and data security, so what do you think are the usual or common findings?
I think my understanding is, in general, it's just the lack of validation in general of computer systems. And I think to Lalitha's point, it may just be lack of training, lack of knowledge in that area. And I definitely would recommend reaching out and finding some training on the topic. Google is a powerful tool. There's a lot of information out there on the internet. Of course, you have to be careful with that, but there is some good information from qualified sites to help guide you. But in general, I think just the lack of understanding of system validation and what that means.
Yeah. Thanks, Marge. So the same question again goes to Michael. So when it comes to edit checks and query management, what are the usual challenges?
Okay, thanks so much, Dawit. So I think in terms of edit checks and query management in general, the most challenges we talk about are things to do with the infrastructure across the clinical sites where we operate. Assuming that you're using an EDC system for data management and you don't have very good internet connectivity, most of the time users will experience different challenges here and there. But if you're not able to use an EDC platform, which should make query management and query processing simpler, then basically it means you need to default to paper-based systems where you have now to deal with the data clarification forms, and this has to be printed and it has to be conveyed back to the sites for resolutions, and then it takes so much time. If we have different data management unit somewhere else and clinical sites are somewhere separate, so it becomes a bit of a challenge trying to coordinate this. We end up taking so much time to resolve queries, but if we can be able to improve on some of these infrastructure and we can be able to get support to develop technologies around this, I think with regards to query management, this should be easy.
Yeah, thanks, Michael, for this response. Yeah, I agree. So infrastructure should be one of the challenge in terms of edit checks and query management. Michelle, this time I'm not missing you. So so with respect to data visualization, fit for purpose data or database closure, so what do you think are the usual challenges or common findings?
Yeah, to not repeat what Lalitha and everyone else has already mentioned, I think resourcing would be important. So like I already said in my slides, if you want speed, you have to have the people in order to make that happen. So that's definitely an important thing. And then I think the other thing that would come to mind is, again, establishing your vendor relationships. And I think that's maybe not always easy, especially getting the lab samples to the labs to be analyzed even presents its own challenges. So if that's delayed, that delays things downstream.
Yeah, so you're specifically zooming on database closure, right? How fast to close the database.
right?
Yeah, so I totally agree. So I think data visualization and fit for purpose data, probably if you can comment something on this two aspects, if you can, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that also ties into what Michael said. You can't really use data visualization if you don't have good internet connection. If you're using a bunch of electronic systems that can't speak to each other, then you probably can't use data visualization at all. And then the fit for purpose, again, that requires resources. You're going to need focused cleaning and focused plans to be made in order to create this fit for purpose concept and pull it off. So you need resources, you need reliable internet.
Yeah. Thanks, Michelle. So I think what people would be interested probably in this audience is that if there are any really available softwares for data visualization and the likes. I totally agree with you. Internet is important for the cross-reading of the different systems, so that it can be displayed on a dashboard or something.
Yeah, so a lot of EDC systems come with their own data visualization or what they call data portals. A lot of the bigger ones do. Of course, there's costs associated with that. Like Oracle and even Metadata Rave, they come with their own data visualizations. And there are many homegrown systems that can take all of your data sources and put them together into a portal so that you can view this data. I did see that there was one of the Q&A questions that came up. So I'll just answer that while I'm talking about data visualization. It's not just for monitoring, monitors definitely use it, but the point of data visualization is to give multiple different people access to that data where they wouldn't already have it. So definitely the monitors can use it, but data management uses it as well to do some focused cleaning, and sponsors would use it to look at metrics and data themselves. Hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Thank you very much for the detailed responses. So Ismaila, the same question. What are the challenges?
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. But maybe before I jump onto mine, just an add-on for the tools for the data visualization. So we have a tool called HighChart that is very powerful for data visualization. We have Power BI and our good old Microsoft Excel can pull data from different sources and display in real time, if only you know how to do it. So thank you. So basically,
yeah, probably on that one, Ismaila, if you type the names of these freely available software to the audience, that would be helpful. I think not now, but at the end of after you respond to the question, probably you may do may do that at that time.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just to mention that when Lalita was actually answering this question, she did mention that this is not actually limited to only low and middle income country. Yes, I agree with that. That is true. So in terms of documentation, in fact, up to now, this has been a very big challenge in actually studies, trials, and data management processes, documentations. So unless you really enforce it, it's difficult for people to actually adopt and do it. So most people start studying from protocol design to the end, and there's no documentation on anything. So basically, it has to do with practices and things. So most sites don't actually adopt this. They are good in what they do, but they don't actually document what actually is done. So basically, that's in terms of documentation. And when we talk about long-term archiving, so basically, for some sites, it has to do with your resources, lack of proper planning. Some sites don't even recognize archiving as one of the processes. So because this is not budgeted for, this is not done. And mostly these are things that most of these documents are just left in the cabinet, and there's no proper documentation of it, and nothing. After some 2 or 3 years, you'll not be able to find where it's located. I have a personal experience with it. So lack of resources, and even the need, the need for it, some sites don't actually recognize it at all. So this is not actually budgeted for. Yeah. And in terms of transcription, that is also a key thing. And most of the times people they just script things when they are transcribing. So instead of writing legibly, people will just scribe like they're just signing the signature, and it's very difficult for people to see. So these are some of the things we actually see in terms of transcription also. So mainly it has to do with resources, planning, and the site involved. Some sites don't recognize some of these at all, and they go ahead and implement things. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ismaila, for covering all the 3 topics regarding these questions. Now I will pause. I'm looking at the Q&A box. We have got some questions. We'll come back to them. Let's proceed to the second question, which is a bit provocative. So the question is, should we discriminate among trials? For example, regulatory types of trials like phase 2B, phase 3 versus phase 1 or phase 2A, or product development trials where you develop vaccines, where you develop diagnostics or drugs, versus other types of trials where you don't have any product at stake. So what's your take on this one? So probably let's hear what you think about this potential discrimination.
So am I going first? Is it okay?
Please.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. All right. So no, my answer would be no, because the data management processes should be consistent across studies, no matter what type of trial it is, because in order to meet data integrity standards, the ALCOA standards that Ismaila mentioned earlier in his presentation, all of that, if to meet those standards, it is best to keep the data management processes consistent. Yes, there will be some minor changes depending on the need of the trial, based on the type of trial it is, but generally the processes should be kept consistent.
Thanks, Lalita. Marge?
Yeah, so this is on a system level, it's a little bit difficult to answer this, because if you have one system that you use for X number of trials and the trials are different, regulatory versus other types, your system level validation is going to be the same, because you may be using that system for regulatory trials, which would impact patient safety and so forth. So no, the answer from my end is, again, no, I would not discriminate.
Okay. So definitely with data security, you don't think there is a need for discrimination, right? Is that it?
Again, if the system is going to be used for different types of trials, you don't necessarily know in advance what types of trials that system would be used for. But I think in terms of protecting your data and just basic security processes, I would not discriminate.
Thanks. So Michael?
Okay, thanks so much. So I think in terms of query management and edit checks, here again, there is really no need to discriminate because any study, any trial, any research where data collection is done is intended to achieve a particular aim at the end. And so if you're going to be able to collect any data to analyze, for information or for changing the policies for regulatory purposes, it doesn't really matter. You need to make sure that it's high quality data. And you can only achieve this by implementing the necessary checks based on the data that you want to collect. So no discrimination.
Michelle?
I'm going to say no too. So as far as quality goes, same as like Lalitha mentioned, And I also think that if you're doing something consistently, you just become better at it. So you're constantly producing a high quality product. You're actually saving time and saving resources when you do it consistently all the time. Analogy would be if you have a recipe for soup and you're Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you're making soup and you're following the recipe. And on Tuesday and Thursday, you're not even looking at the recipe, you're just throwing stuff in the dish. And you're actually spending more time by not following the recipe, and your soup may be terrible, and you may have to start over again. So there's my analogy for cleaning data.
Yeah, thanks for the analogy, Michelle. So, Ismaila.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so basically, I'll go with all the panelists. Yeah, we shouldn't discriminate. However, I'll tell you that most people are tempted to discriminate. Some will say this is not a clinical trial, so let us not follow GCP practice. Let us not validate the software. It's not a clinical trial, it's just a study. So, I mean, that is open for a debate, but this is most at times what we see. Even my lab manager actually is one of the corporates in my previous organization. When it's just a study, wouldn't want to bring GCP or any regulatory requirement into play. So basically, as Michelle rightly said, if you follow the same procedure for everything that you do, it becomes part of you, it becomes easy, and you're able to do it. So I would say we shouldn't discriminate. Let's do it and become part of us and become a good practice. Yeah. Thank you.
So,
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Lalita, please.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I just want to add one other thing to this. So in fact, Ismaila mentioned that. So even in non-clinical studies, implementation science studies, and others, where the regulations are not as stringent, as strict, we are trying to make the processes consistent and have some governing SOPs, etc. We are trying hard to get there so that the data management process is same across clinical and non-clinical areas. So that's kind of been a goal for us, at least, trying to do that in our organization, eventually hoping to get to that.
Yeah, thanks, Lalita, for the addition. But I hope you understand where I'm coming from. There are lots of people, trying to convince, the regulators, saying that, we are not developing products, just service trial, and we don't need, the same level of stringency in terms of, regulations and the likes. And there are even some papers, claiming that, some articles about it. And the other issue to it is resources,
Yes.
to develop, this high level standard of, data management, you need resources. As you have, at most of the panelists also mentioned, resources are going to be important. So that's where I'm coming from, but I totally appreciate, your responses. The next question is, so now that we've seen some of the challenges, some of the problems that you mentioned, so what could be the possible approach to ensure compliance with the different aspects that you mentioned? Just to close the gaps. So again, let me start from you, Lalita.
Okay, thank you. So again, based on what I've already said, I think I would begin with the same thing. Begin planning early in the startup phase of the trial. Start planning for it. Allocate resources and staff for developing all these different, the plans and other activities. For example, data management plan, validation plan, quality plan, transfer plan, etc. So start allocating resources and staff for this. Also for developing these SOPs and work instructions where needed and as applicable to govern the various aspects of the process. Review them, update them periodically, again, to meet the changing needs of the study and the research in general, clinical research in general.
Yeah, thank you very much, Larita. So what you said, perfectly goes with what you presented. Data management, SOPs and DMP, they need continuous review and also amendments. That's totally understandable. So Marge.
Thank you. Yeah, if you have gaps in your process as it is, I would go back to your process. If you don't have a process, develop that process. Make sure that you are, of course, documenting that in an SOP. And then also take a step back and look at your system, do a system risk assessment. How is this impacting patient safety and data integrity? And then go through the requirements, the high-level requirements of that system, and do the same thing. Go through and assign a risk for each requirement, and then go from there. So I think that's really going to help narrow down what needs to be validated and close that gap.
Yeah. So I think, as you mentioned previously, training is going to be very much important, right?
Yes,
I don't
training.
know the percentage of sites who are aware of even whether validation is required for the systems that they have installed in their servers. So training, as you earlier indicated, is going to be probably important. And as you mentioned, Google is a very powerful instrument to use. And again, getting these types of information from reliable resources is going to be important.
Yes.
So yeah, thank you very much, Marge. Michael?
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks so much. So I think I don't want to repeat certain points, but it's really important to allocate resources and strengthen the infrastructure across our sites where data collection actually happens. Sometimes we use open source tools, and then data management teams are left, to just use open source because probably they're readily available. But we should always know that even for open source tools, for us to use them effectively for data management, we still need to really spend some resources, to be able to make sure that we can use them effectively. The other thing is that it's also important to build capacity within teams collecting data. So for example, if within your group, you really don't have certain skill sets that will be key in ensuring that even databases can be set up the right way, and edit checks implemented the right way, and query management processes achieved the right way. Find ways, to be able to build capacity. Take your people for certain training, specific training that can help them to develop these skills, and that will be able to help them, come up with very good data at the end of the day. And last but not least, I think it's also important that we can be able to learn, implement lessons learned from past trials. So,
Michael, we are losing you again. Sorry.
I don't know my internet issues today, but I hope you can hear. I think my last point is that it's important for us to always implement lessons learned from past trials. So when you do a study, at the end of the study, can you be able to list down the different challenges that you experienced within that particular study, so that the moment you are planning on a new study, you can be able to take the necessary precautions to implement key lessons and then improve the data quality that you'll be collecting in the new studies. Thanks.
Thanks, Michael. Michelle, anything to add?
Yeah, just a couple of things. So I would say to develop checklists for like database closure, so that you have a template to use over and over again. That would be one way to close the gaps. Another is for vendors. If you've used like a central lab before and they worked out great, make them your preferred vendor, and then you have an established relationship, communication open with that vendor that you can take forward to all of your other projects.
Thanks, Michelle. So yeah, I really like the idea of having a checklist for database closure. I think that's even regulatory required to have this checklist for database closure. Ismaila, anything at all to add?
Yeah, sure. In fact, we should be guided by SOP, standard operating procedure. and to make sure that we follow it through for all studies. So by following this, we are able to make sure that everything in terms of good documentation, translation, and archiving are followed. So SOPs. And basically, these procedures and good practices are also mentioned most of the times in data management plans. So some will include them there. So following all these documentations and also following documents like the CCGS, which is the case CRF compilation guidelines is also key. It's important to follow documents that you have built, and also training that most of the other panelists mentioned. Training at the beginning of the studies, and to mention at the training the need to follow SOPs and the need to do it. So basically at the beginning, if these things are mentioned, this will actually guide us throughout the studies. And if you follow SOPs, you will find things very easy to do. You won't find it clumsy. So basically, the follow of SOPs and follow regulatory requirements.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ismaila. So most of the things, you said revolves around resource and infrastructure, training, planning, implementation of lessons learned. That's partly, quality, checklists for database, and preferred vendors for sites using vendors, and finally SOPs. So I think everything has been said. That's what I feel. But if you feel you have got any last message, I know Michelle has already said keep calm and clean smart. That's her take-home message. But others, if you have got any additional take-home message, so go ahead, please.
Well, so I'll quote Benjamin Franklin here. So anyone who fails to plan is planning to fail. So plan ahead and implement. That's my take-home message.
Thank you very much for that smart thing. Yeah. Marge, if you have got any.
I think this has been the theme of most of the entire presentation, but training, and documented processes. That's my take-home message.
Thank you very much. Michael?
My take-home message is simple. Data is expensive and costly to obtain. And so if we have an opportunity to collect data, let us do it right the very first time, and we'll be able to save on some money.
Thank you. Thank you. Michelle, do you have any?
No, that's it.
We have
That's my
already seen it.
Thanks.
Yeah. So, Ismaila?
Yes, in fact, maybe I'll just say, as other panelists said, the same thing. I mean, we should adhere to the documents that and the guidelines that we that help us in executing our tasks. Follow through every SOP. Make sure we, as one of the panelists said, make sure we have a checklist of everything. Make sure everything is done properly. And one thing I also want to mention, there is this app which is called OneNote for documentation. Once it is installed by your IT, it's actually something that when you type in, it automatically sync, and your other people can see it from elsewhere, and you don't need to click save. You can always come back to it. So everything you do, you go to OneNote, you type it in, and so this is one of the way to document things, what you do, your processes, and things. So OneNote is good. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your take-home message. So before I close, there are some questions in the Q&A box. So I will read them out. The first one is what CleanOps? Yeah, CleanOps is it's a training program for study coordinators. So it's currently being managed by CDT-Africa. The idea is to have this training regularly, if possible, every year. So the next training is starting in June, July this year. So that's CleanOps. The second question is, what is the average archival period data captured in eCRF? So, Ismaila, should I come to you for this question since it talks about archival? So the question is, what is the average archival
Yeah,
period?
so basically, one of the standards is to archive for 2 years, but as I rightly said, it varies from institution to institution. It varies depending on your resources. But from my experience, if I must tell you, I was contacted after 12 years of study to get something from a CRF that actually we have used, and it actually helped. So as I said, it depends on the institute. So if you make it a long term, the better for you. So basically, it depends, and on average is 2 years, but you can actually agree depending on what you can foresee in the future. I don't know if any of the panelists have something to say in addition to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ismaila. So while the others are preparing, yeah, like any other data collected in clinical trials, data collected in eCRF, they are also, the rule also applies to data collected through eCRF. Probably, if there is no source document for populating the eCRF, the screen copy of the eCRF, as Ismaila indicated, has to be stored on the sites because, the site should have, a contemporary copy of, the data that they have submitted to the sponsors. That's just to avoid, exclusive, possession of the data by the sponsor. Otherwise, like Ismaila said, the general rule by, recommendation in, I'd say GCP is 2 years, but some sponsors might have, even more stringent requirements of storing the data even for longer. Other panelists, if you have got additional points on this one, you are welcome. Otherwise, I move to the next question. So the next question, I will read it out. I think I missed it, but is data visualization being used for monitoring purposes or more for evaluation? Should I come to you, Michelle?
Sure, yeah. So all of the above. Monitors use it, and data management uses it, sponsors use it. So it's not specific to any one group of people. That's kind of the beauty of data visualization, is it allows multiple people to look at the data in real time.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Any other additions, Maila? You have been talking about some softwares and the like. By the way, don't forget to type the names of the softwares, Maila.
Yeah, I'll type the name, and as Michelle said, so basically, one of the use is actually, I'll give you an example of data visualizations. As I mentioned before, is recruitment against target. When you are recruiting patients, you want to know your target at any point in time, first quarter, second quarter, third quarter. Most important, the principal investigator need to be able to know this. So the principal investigator may even be in an aeroplane, and because the dashboard is created and it's online, he can quickly open his smartphone and then look at recruitment against target and take a decision. So basically, if you use, I'll mention it again, iChat, you can deploy it. Power BI, you can deploy it. Our good old Microsoft Excel can also do it. So maybe I'll type down this one also.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Michelle and Smaila, for the responses. Then the next question is, how does query resolution turnaround affect quality, reliability, and trust? I think I should give the opportunity to Michael to respond to this.
Okay, thanks so much. I will respond to this. So query resolution turnaround time may not necessarily affect quality per se. But look at a situation where you have a very large trial. You are enrolling over 1,000 participants and maybe across several sites. And then you generate so many queries and you have to send these queries back to sites, and then the sites take forever to resolve queries. So one, you will realize that at any given point in time, the site might be overwhelmed in terms of responding to queries. And then if they're overwhelmed and they're not able to respond to queries at the right time, there are study timelines that might be affected with this. So maybe an interim analysis is approaching, is coming ahead, and you're trying to clean your data and do some sort of analysis, before the interim analysis, and you're not able to do this as a data manager because the sites are taking forever to respond to queries. So I do not respond to this, but you will see that there will be an issue of trust between the data management team and the sites who are generating data, and maybe reliability will be affected in one way or the other, because at the end of the day, if they take forever to respond to queries and then finally they respond to the queries the right way, it will be fine in terms of quality. But then there will be a lot of questions and trust issues. People will be wondering, why did you take forever, to be able to respond to these queries? Were these sources not available for you to respond immediately? So I think in general, it is just important that we have a very short turnaround time in terms of resolving queries, especially if the queries can be resolved as soon as they are generated, maybe within 1 week. That is the recommended time. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Michael. Yeah, that is true. Probably we've heard from the presenters that the industry recommended time between last subject, last visit, and database closure is 36 days or less than that. So if we are aiming to meet this objective, then responding to the queries is going to be important, as Michael correctly said. The other aspect to it is that there is an issue of memory bias. So the more time is spent before you respond to the queries. I mean, if you take a very long time to respond to the queries, then probably the sites capturing the individuals capturing the data may not have a memory of what went wrong at that time, and the probability of responding correctly to the queries generated may be sort of compromised. And with that aspect, the quality and the reliability could be affected. That's just one point to add to what Michael correctly indicated. The next question is from Omar. Thanks very much for your brief information related to data management. I would like to know more about data archive for long-term, especially one-to-one archive. Yeah, so probably Omar, you're asking for more information, right? Probably what we can do is that I will hook you with Ismail up so that he'll send more information to you. Probably we are having time constraint, and I know Ismail can talk and talk non-stop, but since we are constrained with time, I think the proposal I made could be fine with you. The second one is, I think, some sort of comment or introduction. So I will leave it for the audience to read it. I will go to the next one, and it's from Bakari. Can a system be revalidated, and what would warrant revalidation at any phase of a trial? Thank you, Marge, for turning on your video.
Sure. Yeah, so I think this is a two-part question. Yes, the system can be revalidated, and that's dictated by your SOPs. And when I say revalidated, I mean like a full system revalidation. So in our particular SOP, we say if we haven't implemented any changes to a system in, I think, 2 years, then we're going to revalidate the system. But of course, all along the way, you might be receiving or requesting updates to the system, and that would include validation change control validation along the way. As far as the trial-specific validation, so Michelle or Michael, I'll kick this over to you. If your system does get an upgrade and you validate on the system level, how does that impact the trial on your end?
Sure. So yeah, I guess it kind of depends on what's being changed. So if your system is completely changing the way it collects electronic signatures, right? That's going to impact every study that's already there. I think you also have to take into account where your study is in its own timeline with regard to that update. So if you're about to go into a database lock, you probably don't want to make a complete system, revalidation right in the middle of your database lock timeline. So those are two things that come to mind for me anyways.
Thank you very much, Marge and Michelle, for the response. So we move to the last question. It seems we have got, well, they are posted as two questions, but to me it's one question that's about clinical data science and clinical data management. So the first one is, how could clinical data science influence clinical trial as clinical data management is moving into data science? That's the first one. The second one is, could clinical data scientists take the job of clinical data managers? I'm not sure to whom this question should be forwarded to.
I can take a stab at it first.
Yeah, please, Michelle.
I guess, so if everyone else doesn't know what clinical data science is, it's more of kind of along the lines of the data visualization, but not necessarily only that. It's just looking at large volumes of data on a holistic level. So to answer the question, how could clinical data science influence clinical trials? I think that this is the way the industry is going, and whether we like it or not, we're going to have to adapt some of this. And I only say that last year I attended the SDTM global conference, and this was the focus of much of that conference. So this would include, AI learning, like computerized learning when we're looking at data. And I don't think it would impact every trial, because if you have a really small phase 1 trial, it's not worth it. But I guess my summary would be, it's not going to take over our jobs, but if we don't embrace it and include it, I think we're gonna get left by the wayside, and that's just my opinion. So if anyone else has other opinions, I think it's highly beneficial, a way of looking at the data.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Michelle. So, Lalita, do you have anything to add?
No, I just wanted to agree with Michelle. I think she brought a very good point, that, this is probably the future. This is how we are going to go. A lot more of data visualization, data scientists looking at data, large amount of data, and taking that into consideration. I think that's the way of the future. And they can, but that is like elevating the clinical data managers to scientist positions, which is great for us. But that could be possible, and because that also involves some kind of analysis of that data. So it's a fine line that could blur in the future.
Thank you very much, Lalita, for that addition. I think the last question was, whether that person has missed the names of the data visualization softwares. I have posted them. So I think we have come to the end of the webinar. Thank you, the panelists, all of them, very useful discussion, for taking your time and share your knowledge. We are very much grateful, and to the audience for spending your time and staying with us for almost 2 hours. thank you all for making this now happen. So with that, I'll close the session.